For the history of watchmaking, the prized jewel on the crown for so many companies was based on design, movements, and complications. The brand, Franck Muller, who many knew to be the king of complications, was a top-tier brand by the standards of the 20th century, but barely a century later, they seem to have almost phased away from the mind, leaving enthusiasts guessing what could have been. What went wrong for Franck Muller? From numerous scandals to rumours to its very own history, tag along as we dissect it all in this video. So then, let's begin with the brand itself. The Franck Muller brand was founded by both Franck and his business partner, Vartan Simakis, in 1992. Muller was a watchmaker from Switzerland who, at a very young age, showed his impressive talent for innovation, especially in constructing all kinds of stuff. It sounded like the perfect team. While Simakis was a jeweler who was more intrigued with the business aspect of things, Muller was the creator and brains behind the dynamics. The brand's motto, or to be more precise, the slogan, was Master of Complications. The aim behind their joint effort was the production of crazy, complicated watches. They weren't interested in the philosophy behind the average three-hand layouts. Intense tourbillons were more of their taste. Franck Muller watches marked the glamorous lifestyle of the late 1990s and early 2000s before any other brand. As a matter of fact, one wouldn't be wrong if he called them the pioneers of odd-looking watches and complications. Orchestrated by the businessman Vartan Simakis, the brand benefited from a high-end image thanks to a few watches made by Master of Complications watchmaker Franck Muller, but generated most of its cash flow by selling regular three-hands watches at a premium price with the off-the-shelf ETA movements. To give credit where it's due, they made very complex designs with a three-dimensional sapphire crystal. Putting it all into perspective, the watch itself should probably be crazy expensive, but many of them were released with a moderately fair price tag. The brand has public annual events where they release their new series of watches that are unprecedented in the watch world in terms of design, although most of their watches were inspired by American watches from the 1930s. The most notable watches were the Revolution 2 and 3, but overall, design-wise, Franck Muller always took a lot of pride in the intense looks and crazy complications they produced, which can be said to be the entire personality. While the company was growing in strength and admiration, it still had its shortcomings with so many scandals surrounding it. And no, we don't mean the comparisons in designs between Richard Mille and Franck Muller watches, although truthfully, both watches do look like sisters or cousins at the very worst. So what went wrong exactly? To be fair, the first and probably one of the most obvious blueprints that brought forth the fall from grace for the brand was Muller's exit from his own brand, which ironically proudly bears his own name. You probably don't need to be told this, but it really didn't go down smoothly. Do you understand how important Muller was to the brand? I mean, this guy was the brains behind the entire thing. His partner was just more or less the business head. Remember their roles? Nicholas Fawkes, a well-known journalist and historian, wrote an interesting article, or dare we say, a biography of Franck Muller. In it, he described him as a child prodigy whose fate was to create a revolution in the watch industry, changing it forever. However, he added that Muller was already in a losing game due to how things were in the 80s, early 2000s. Here's why. Given how bohemian Muller can be, he presented his very own oscillation tourbillon with a regular dial and jumping hours in 1986 with a view of being different and complicated. But this move in particular had a relatively bad timing. The thing is, it was released at a time in which people barely even knew what a tourbillon was. But then again, watches being complicated was the Muller way, so it's hard to throw shades at his niche. Did you know? According to Fawkes, Muller also once stripped naked after attending a fancy dinner. The reason being he wasn't happy about the dress code. He also jumped right into the pool and looked to the sky to philosophize about restrictions on time. Yes, he was drunk. That's just music to the tune of Franck Muller doesn't play by the rules all the time, or maybe even any time. Part of the controversy that struck Franck Muller came in the early 2000s. The brand was on the receiving end of some criticism from watch enthusiasts when a wave of rumours spread all over the horology scenes that Franck Muller was using non-branded, low-grade movements and branding it as a Swiss movement with, of course, a price that's fitting for a Swiss watch. The company denied the rumours, but again, the reputation had already taken a hit. Years later, a big feud between Muller and Simakis emerged. The pivotal thing about the fallout between them was that it arguably came at the peak of the brand itself. In 2003, the sales chart went through the roof, and in 2002, it was estimated that the brand's revenue rose about 54%. And they gained in markets in the globe ranging from North America, Europe, and even Asia. As a matter of fact, the company even predicted there would be a double in revenue the next year due to weak competition at the time. However, that never genuinely actualised, as 03 was a big conflict. According to reports, Muller left work one day that year and just never came back at all. Simakis made a statement to the Swiss newspapers that the brand would continue with or without Muller, and he could decide whether he wanted to return. There were rumours that Muller wanted to liquidate the company, but it was debunked after Simakis denied it. However, while the watch world was stunned by the state of affairs in the company, the media made a meal out of it, calling the Franck Muller brand to be a crisis, although, to be fair, it was a mess at the time. To worsen the situation, the people from the industry started to critique the approach in design as they felt it wasn't appealing to the blossoming Chinese market, as round cases of similar proportions were the preference over larger cases. You're probably wondering why striking the Chinese market and getting gold was so important to them. In the early years of the millennium, there were so many signals that China would become a top dog in the fashion scene. Every innovative leading brand knew this, even outside of horology, and everyone tried to rush in and stake their claims. However, Muller still stuck to his personal preference of making his own kind of watches, which further led to another fallout. Another area where Franck Muller underperformed, despite the fact that it was technically out of their control, was the area of resale value. It was just so awful. Other Swiss watch brands such as Rolex, Audemars Piguet and Patek Philippe have strong resale values, but at Franck Muller, the value plummets just as soon as you make the purchase for it. It almost made one question why they didn't put more effort into marketing, given there isn't a single celebrity or influencer seen wearing one. As a watch brand, Franck Muller may have had the right idea, but perhaps they just ran out of innovative ideas to push things forward. Yes, there was unbelievably bad timing and probably even bad luck involved, but one can't shake off the feeling that they still had the power to change things for themselves instead of banking on their exceptional complications and unique design. When all is said and done, the burning question remains, where on earth is Franck Muller and what are they doing? Here's an interesting story you have to listen to. According to the Social Gazette of the Canton of Geneva, the watch brand Franck Muller was declared bankrupt by default by a court of the first instance on April 24, 2017. And like a domino effect, this instantly meant Muller himself was bankrupt. It drew the watch world to a frenzy, and pandemonium ensued with journalists speculating. But as it turns out, it was a joke made by them, and it was never true. We got you, didn't we? It's really sad when you think just how good the brand Franck Muller was by all standards and how far they could have gone, if not for the series of unfortunate events that followed them. The Franck Muller brand may be a sleeping giant now, but there is no shadow of a doubt that with a little tinkering here and there, they may not only be on their feet, but also toe-to-toe with some of the best horology has to offer.